Jessica Jones, and I'm ready to take you on a mysterious journey right now. We welcome you to Off the Trails right here on the Spaced Out Radio's YouTube channel. If you guys haven't hit subscribe yet, please do. We would love to have you guys. And shout out to Bumblefoot for that awesome intro music. I always appreciate that. All right, you guys, please go follow us on social media. At Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. You guys can find me at thecryptidhuntress.com. That's my website. That's where everybody can find me. If you have a question, you want to send me a remote viewing target, whatever y'all got, find me there. All my shows are there. All the events I'm going to be at are there, and much more. Okay. And I do have a shop there too. Also, if you'd like to support what I do, I have a shop. It's called War Woman Goods. That's on Etsy. And I have a Patreon, and I want to give a huge thank you to all my Patreon members. That's the Cryptid Huntress. Y'all can find me there. Okay. Well, I have a fantastic guest here for us. Once again, I have Michael Roser here of DarkHour Paranormal. It's going to be amazing. Don't forget that right after this show, After Hours has a fantastic program set up. So y'all be sure to go check them out right after this show is over tonight. All right, y'all, let's get to our guest. Michael Roser is the founder of DarkHour Paranormal and the manager and content provider of ThirdPhase UFO Report at DarkHour Paranormal. DHP is focused on exploring esoteric avenues, unearthing history, highlighting the paranormal, black projects, and more. And let me tell y'all, I got to meet DHP in person, and I see some people in chat tonight. I got Long Island Bigfoot here and Brian from Montauk is Strange. We all spent about a week in Montauk, New York recently. DarkHour Paranormal, Michael was there. So please help me welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight, my buddy, Michael DHP. What's up, Michael? Welcome to Spaced Out Radio. Hey, you're muted.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Round two. Thank you for inviting me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. You're like me. Like I usually forget to unmute myself too. So it's just a thing. It's what happens. Sometimes.
Happens to the best of us, right?
Love it. It does. It does. And you are one of the best of them. You really are. I really enjoyed getting to know you, to meet you. And man, you are very dynamic when it comes to the paranormal and all these topics that you look into. I just got to say, well, you're welcome anytime. And yeah, we had quite a week up in Montauk, or at least a weekend. And tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that. Like after we went there, because for the audience who's not familiar, Montauk is the home of Camp Hero, where the Montauk Project took place. And we were up there actually for a 20-year anniversary of the USS Eldridge reappearing in a portal. And so it was a wild trip. But what were your thoughts on that trip? And I mean, have you had time to soak it all in?
Oh, yes. All right. Sorry. I know there's a little bit of a lag here. So I'm going to go on what I think I heard you say there. The trip out there was very unique for the lot of us. Now, initially, I had planned to go out with Brian Minnick from Montauk is Strange and Mike Colantino from Long Island Bigfoot. We do this every year. We've done it for the past 2 years. And we're usually out there to observe the biorhythm, doing our own work within Camp Hero. Each of us have very similar goals and aims when it comes to this type of excursion, but we also have our compartmentalized interests that lie within those endeavors. So James Rink, I got in touch with him through Penny Bradley, got back in the wintertime, and he asked me, he said, would you like to go out to Montauk with me? I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. And he cited at the time a date that was outside of the summer, and I thought, well, I wouldn't mind going to Montauk twice this year. That's fine. So as things got closer to when we decided to come out between August 11th and August 15th, it just so happened that James decided to come out at the same time, which became very fortuitous for everyone because it gave us an opportunity to get to know each other, to meet each other through our experiences and through our personal characters. And, sort of, how do I put this? It's not necessarily a basking in this energy, but you're definitely sinking in and sharing this energy with other people that are experiencers or have been, through Black Project for to James We made in a couple beautiful houses out there. I never made it to the other house. I mean, I didn't have to. It seemed that everybody came the main house and then just slept in the other place, which was fine because that meant everyone was together the majority of the time. So again, this was a very unique experience for everyone, and I felt that there was a lot of healing that occurred with our time there, and I think that was definitely my aim going into this trip, regardless of whether it was with this troop or not. That's what we were focusing on, and that was what the general motif of my second documentary on the Montauk Project was about: the survivors and the healing. And sure enough, that's what I found when we went down there together.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So you've done documentary. You're on your second documentary about the Montauk Project or a secret space program, all that stuff. Tell me about your first documentary.
The first documentary was a bit more of a personal account. I was still very much in the throes of figuring out where I was the Montauk Project, and energetically, I was being pulled, as I've mentioned, in other Asian. I between couple different spots, but in Connecticut on the shoreline there, and I've always looked out on Plum Island, for my entire life, and never realized that just behind that was Montauk and Camp Hero. But that first documentary focused on the journey out there. I had Peter Moon in that documentary. He was within our excursion going out to Camp Hero. We went and visited the alleged submarine base that is now inoperable, but was apparently heralded as, one of the travel routes for how people were getting in and out of the Sound during wartime and so forth. Obviously, knowing the history of this area was very militaristic. So, of course, there were other installations around Camp Hero that were connected in the same military fashion. But again, it was a very personal account. It was the first time I was meeting Mike, Long Island Bigfoot, and Brian Montauk Estrange in person. And the synergy of doing this was it was absolutely amazing. And I knew that once I had gotten on that ferry, even just to get there, that we had solidified something that needed to happen. It was like a lock in the key, snapping in and fitting flush. And sure enough, anytime we've gone out to Montauk since, there's always been this question of, oh, well, where are we going to stay? How are we going to make it happen? What are we going to be doing? And the synchronicity always brings itself together, and we find that we get the most out of these trips just being with each other. So again, when we had this excursion this time with all that extra energy with us, it was unbelievable. And to be able to experience that with people who've been there or had connections to that area without being directly physically there. Okay, we'll say, I mean, for now, maybe they don't live in the area now. They live in Arizona or California, somewhere else, but have history with Camp Hero and Montauk. So again, that's basically what the first one was about. Just going through that. We didn't really have access to as many places as we did through the second documentary, you'll see. And I think that's a very big part of what separates the first installment from the second one.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So I think I vaguely remember I think it was the first night that we were there, and we were hanging out on the back porch, and we discovered that we're both friends with a good friend of mine, Jim Goodall. And so I just want to say what's up to Jim Goodall. I know we were joking around about how I was going to be you're going to be my dance partner, actually.
That's right.
We all know,
he was heartbroken.
We all know Jim. Yeah, he was, right. Well, see, that was actually
he'll
the
cut the rug better than I
Vegas
would.
party. Yeah.
What's that?
I was dancing with him. I was actually dancing with him at the Spaced Out Radio Vegas fan party. That's what he was. So it was a little bit of Spaced Out Radio history there with Jim Goodall and I getting to dance all night.
I would have loved to have seen that.
Oh, it was so fun. Maybe you can go to the party next year. So you and Jim spent a trip. Y'all went to Belize, right? Was it Belize? Could you hear me? Are you there?
Started to cut out a little bit. You said y'all went to Belize. That was the last I heard.
Belize, yes.
Can you hear me?
Tell me about that. I can hear you. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Technology. I wish
I know.
Synchronicity to us, right? Kind of known Jim through Blake and Brent Cousins. They've done a lot of work with him, and he was somebody that I had reached out to at one point. I think we had a phone conversation with the boys, in the background. It was abbreviated for what it was worth, but I knew that Jim was somebody that I wanted to get to know. I felt something there. And it wasn't until Jared Murphy had designed this whole trip out to Belize that I realized I was finally going to get to meet Jim Goodall in person. Now, the curious thing was, I had a layover in Texas, before we hit straight down to Belize, and Jim was going to be on the same connecting flight that I was taking. It seems that would make sense, right? And so I spent an afternoon with him over lunch, just going back and forth, getting to know each other a little bit before we actually got on the plane and got to Belize. But once we got to Belize, we just clicked. We became very good friends almost overnight, and it seemed a very natural affair in meeting Jim. My nights would end with he and I hanging out together. Let me put it that way. When everybody else had gone to bed, it was Jim and I up outside in the dark, just talking about life experiences. I mean, Jim is a fantastic storyteller, as you well know. I'm sure if anybody's met Jim, you know how good he is at telling stories, and they're not exaggerated. That's the best thing about it. I mean, he's very straightforward. His life has been wild and crazy enough. He doesn't have to exaggerate anything, and he's got fantastic ideas on how things go. Now, we got into our history and our interests and so forth. At one point I realized he had a love very similar to the way I did, but obviously much more involved given his past and his experiences. And growing up not too far away from the world-renowned Groton sub base in Connecticut, I again had some of this influence there. So he kind of got that sense as we moved forward throughout the weeks that we were there, and ended up giving me a signed copy of his book on submarines, which I have gone through multiple times. It's absolutely wonderful. I didn't expect so many lovely pictures, but yeah, that's how Jim and I got to know each other. And of course, when Jared had his Widowmaker heart attack, Jim was called me first, and he said, listen, he had a heart attack. And he was the communication before I talked to Jared's girlfriend about what was going on. So Jim's a solid guy all the way around, upside and down. And I'm very honored to be friends with such an awesome person.
Absolutely. And we had him here at spacedoutradio on World UFO Day. That was the last time he came on and hung out with me, and we just had a blast. We did. We had a blast. I just thought of something. You actually were with Long Island Bigfoot Mike the morning where he got a video of a Sasquatch while we were up in New York. What was that like? Had you ever seen a Bigfoot before in person?
Not before I met Mike. In fact, when I met him, his channel was relatively small, but he was just as ambitious as he is today. And, he was just putting content out. But the first thing I said to him when I brought him on the show is I said, all right, let me get this out of the way here. Bigfoot in Long Island? And he goes, yeah. I said, how? I mean, we think of Bigfoot, we think of, wide open forest out in Oregon or, Colorado or up in Canada, somewhere where there's a large expanse of wilderness. And yet you have these patchy areas of, forest down in Long Island. I said, how can this possibly be? Well, not only did I not realize that there's a whole section of Long Island known as the Pine Barrens, which is actually classified as a desert, I didn't realize how much activity Mike had already captured within his own experiences. So there were two instances that I can recall right now that I've been with Mike and I've seen something I can't explain. And the curious part about this is that when he shows it to me, he has an eye like a hawk. When he looks into those woods, he's gravitating towards whatever movement's there, at the very least from what I can observe. This guy is on top of it. So when he sees a little being huddling over here behind a tree or underneath a leaf, and he pulls out his phone and he's pulling up, the zoom on his camera, and you can see this thing right there. That was when I understood that it intertwined sort of magic, incredibly to the forest and the elementals and the energy that was there. I'll recount these two experiences very quickly. The first time was in the first documentary. I don't think this was actually on film, but I did see somehow he had caught this with the flashlight. One of these little creatures kind of hanging amongst the. This is crazy, and the second is where he did exactly the same thing. We were somewhere else. It was actually, come here, come look at this, come look at this. So I'm going to walk over to the phone, and sure enough, I see like Bigfoot, but almost reminded me of some of the work that Brian Froud has done with the fairy oracles. He has the fairy oracle deck, but he's done a lot of work. I mean, he was involved in the Dark Crystal and all this sort of thing within cinema, but his style, I find to be very accurate in what I've seen personally of these elementals. So that's those are really the only two times that I've seen cryptids, at least that I would classify as such, that I certainly couldn't understand or had an explanation for, I should say.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, the Debster. Thank you for that super sticker. That's awesome. We appreciate you at spacedoutradio. Okay. So Michael, I mean, I know you, I've met you, and but I don't know a lot about your history and your past. I was wondering, how did you get into all this paranormal stuff and get so interested in what you do? Because I know everybody has a story. I've got one. What got you into all this stuff?
Well, it was back in the early 90s that I started really paying attention to whatever information was out there in regards to esoterics. Arthur C. Clarke, his Mysterious Universe. You had Unsolved Mysteries. Robert Stack was an influence of mine when it came to doing voiceover work. And then, of course, getting into radio, shortly after when I got into college. I was bringing with me a whole host of different bits of research that I had been doing over that last decade, from 2000, back to 1990. What really opened the door for me was I was always aware that there was something more. And this actually created a lot of conflict between my parents and I, because it was enough to be an unruly teenager, rebellious. The fact that I knew that there was more and couldn't express this or couldn't talk about this to anybody, or, at least vacation and wave that conversation, was very difficult. And it brooded a lot of hostility within myself, which was misdirected, as you can very well imagine, at the age of 12, 13 years old. But I had the intuition at the time that I just said, I'm going to ask, because my mother had visited clairvoyance, for quite some time, quite a bit of her life, along with my father, although she was more open about it than my father was at the time. So I knew that there was an element of this within the family. And I said, let me just ask my higher self. And I didn't call it that at that time. I was more ensconced in the religious aspect of things. That's how it is. So we use that particular verbiage and language. I said, what's the purpose of life, right? This is a very simple, elementary question. This is where you start in most cases. What's the purpose of it all? What's the meaning? And, I asked this question, for some time. Maybe it was only a week or so. Maybe it was a little bit less. But there was one day I was sitting on my bed and I was looking, I wrote it down on a piece of paper and I'm just kind of studying it. All this internal to be. Now, it's a very nebulous sort of answer. It can be interpreted in many different ways. But the way that I took it was that, life is gone further. People have mentioned in one way or another, or other mediums or channelers, we've gone through a set of ideas that have brought us to a conclusion that the soul or the spirit of a person, it's absolutely benign in preference to what we experience here in this dramatic play that we call life. And it just wants the experience. That's what it wants. It wants the experience. It doesn't care what it is. We have the preference. The ego has the preference. And we make convictions and actions and behaviors based on those preferences here. But anyway, I digress, because your question was, how did I get into this? So I got into Drunvalo Melchizedek's Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life. The very first book I read was Betty J. Eadie's Embraced by the Light. I actually had her on the show about a year ago. It was absolutely wonderful. And yeah, that show was for me, guys, I know. But a lot of people enjoyed it as well. And at that point, my mother said, "You know what?" I was 14 years old. She said, let me bring you for your first reading." She said, "I have a clairvoyant friend who had agreed, even though you're only 12 years old or 14 years old, whatever it was, says, I'll bring you for the reading." And I said, "Okay, I'd be curious to do this." So I went for the reading, and she felt that I wasn't going to be impressionable the way that perhaps somebody else would be. And this is why she agreed to do it. Mentioned things like, "Oh, you're a very old soul. You're very connected to music." Wouldn't tell her anything myself. And I know my mother didn't share, certain information about it. And this has sort of opened the door for me to see how this thing kind of worked. And she said the most significant thing I pulled out of that reading, she said, you're a natural healer. I said, "Well, what does that mean?" She says, "You can work with energy." And we didn't have a name for it back then, like Reiki. That's a household name now. It wasn't back in the 90s. I mean, we knew about modalities, but it was about energy healing. That's what we called it. She says, "I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine." I think his name was Herman, if I can remember correctly. Yeah, I could be wrong, but regardless, she says, "Come down. We have a gathering at a spiritualist church," which really wasn't a church. It was a place where people just met, and there were chairs and maybe an AV room. And she said, "We go down there and we practice this hands-on healing, and we do it once a week. Why don't you come down and just, see how it feels?" I said, "Okay." So I met this guy, and he had an incredible story behind him. He was in a car accident. Every bone in his body had been broken. He was in a cast full for 8 months or something crazy like this. And then he got into the energy healing and was going else, using energy to prep himself and not having any Novocaine or pain through the experience. And I was intrigued. So this gentleman actually guided me into the world of energy healing. I picked up very quickly. And from that point on, that's when I really started to open up in a spiritual sense. And I became much more of a researcher and experiencer parallel in, those existences. And yeah, I mean, that's where everything kind of started for me.
Oh, wow. It sounds very similar to how I kind of got started in a lot of the stuff too. With the Bigfooting
Hmm.
is I went to like a meeting, like a variety show kind of meetup that met like once a week. And that's how I met my team of Bigfoot researchers that I'm a team with to this day. And that was a while back, a long time ago. So anyways, yeah. And I was going to like places where you could like psychic fairs and stuff like that. I mean, I got into it
Yes, psychic
similarly.
fairs.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Psychic fairs. Yeah, I think a lot of people get started off with that. When you get curious, you start wanting to like look into stuff and you don't really know where to go, but then you have like a community psychic fair in one of the towns. And I think that's a great place. Just to get when you have an open mind, go try it out. It might change your life, right?
Absolutely. I don't know if fairs anymore, though. I think have changed. Uh, but there are
Yeah.
still gatherings and symposiums that you can go to and meet people of this like mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you could just show up at Montauk and hang out with a bunch of cool people that you just meet and spend a week with them in a
Yes.
house. Yeah, like we did. Yeah, speaking of which, we got Long Island Bigfoot in here. Thank you for that super sticker, Mike. That's really sweet. He says 2 legends, 1 screen. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'll take it.
There.
Thanks, Mike. Okay. Yeah, he was with us out there too. Um, that is too funny. Well, I was okay. So speaking of all this energy work and psychic stuff, I was watching one of your shows, and actually, I think you mentioned this to me when we were in Montauk. You had an entity attachment to you for a while. Would you be comfortable talking about that with my audience tonight and with me? Because this is something that's very real. I've had attachments before,
Hmm.
um, but this one really affected you. And I would love for you to talk about it a little bit tonight if you're
Sure.
comfortable. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I released last night about a half hour show of just my testimony on this one particular entity that ended up following me home. Um, it's funny because, I often talk about this subject. I say there were two predominant entities that I've dealt with. And I keep forgetting that the house that I lived in with my kid's mother back in like 2013 to 2015 harbored some sort of very negative entity, which I think was human. Um, I have my own thoughts on the origin, but regardless, that was probably almost more harrowing in way of an experience than what I'm going to relate to you now. But regardless, this other entity just overshadows in my mind any other experience very weird, after everything has been said and done. So there's a place out here in Massachusetts called the Rutland Prison Camp.
Oh gosh. Prison camp.
It spans like that. If you go out to this property, it's wonderful to, walk your dog through the woods. There's some hiking trails out there. Very nice area. And I had visited this place many, many times prior to the incident that I'm going to tell you. And I generally felt a sense of peace there. Now, it was known to have activity. And one of the reasons that I originally went out there was to, ghost hunt. And this was back in 2009, 10, something like that. And, I had my own outfit. It was under the same moniker of DarkHour Paranormal. Well, that's where that originated from. And, it was a place that, just seemed to hold certain promise. So again, I've been out there multiple times, and there was one day I was at work, and this and he's actually of 11 Hills Paranormal Investigations. I said, okay, good. I haven't heard of you guys. He said, no, we've been around for a while. He gave me a couple business cards. He said, give me a call. I said, great. We'll make some connections. And I did so a few days later. Maybe it was towards the latter end of the week. I don't recall. But I picked one of the cards and I picked it up. And his name was Steve. So I talked to Steve on the phone for about a half an hour. And I said, look, you want to go out tonight? Let's go out to a location. Let's do a little investigation. He said, yeah, sure. All right. I'll meet you out at Rutland State Prison Camp. Because again, you wouldn't have to worry about the law going out there. You could be there and it wasn't an issue. You weren't bothering anybody. So I went out to this location, and, there was, up by the root cellar where we would park, I see this guy, an older gentleman, tall, kind of spindly. And I'm thinking to myself, who the hell is this? Man, this isn't Steve. Who is this guy? So I, parked up by him and I get out. I was like, hey, how you doing, man? And he goes, hey, what's going on? I said, was he who I was talking on the phone with? He goes, yeah. I said, who are you? My name is Bill Cram. I'm the head and founder of the 7 Hills Paranormal Investigators. So basically what happened is I had two crams. No idea that I called the wrong number, so to speak. But this became very advantageous for both of us in respect to the work that we would do going forward. And that particular day, he brought out the Ovilus and he brought out a couple other pieces of equipment. And we were getting, through the word bank, the words evil or Satan or devil. And this is the first time I'd actually heard anything like this. And I was, for whatever reason, kind of after a darker experience, again, some sort of weird draw. I felt I needed to have that experience just to, I don't know, maybe convince myself and all that. But long story short, that day, and a little bit later on, I said, we're filming a pilot for television, and I picked the Rutland Prison Camp, and there was another place that I wanted to cover for this pilot. And he said, that's great. He goes, listen, if you're going to go back out there, just be careful. I said, why? He goes, because there was some sort of faction or organization that was out there, obviously very juvenile in their magic arts, and they pulled something out of the ethers that it's a non-human entity. It's not supposed to be there. I actually exercised it off another investigator about 8 months prior. I said, oh, okay. Well, he goes, just don't go by the tunnels and you should be fine. He said, that's where he hangs out. I said, all right, I can do that, because the tunnels are off some ways from where the root cellar is. I wasn't really interested in going over there in the dark, because honestly, you could fall through. It's about a 6-foot drop. I said, yeah, that's fine. I'll stay away. So my team and I went out there. There were 2 other guys. I kept the teams very small. I want no more than 3 people. And we started the investigation in the root cellar, and we're just questioning. And I feel myself sort of growing agitated. I couldn't really put my finger on it, so I just kind of let it go. And in the presentation that I put together last night, I made mention of an example where I had a lighter in my pocket. Apparently at one point, as I'm questioning, I pulled it out and I'm holding it in my hand. Now, if I were to guess, I'd say I was probably holding it in my hand for about 5 minutes. On my kind of step that is going on here. We're been aware of that, and I'm not too sensory deprived sitting in the dark here. I do this all the time. So I put the lighter back in my pocket, and I started feeling a little weird, but I didn't really think too much of it. And eventually I said, you know what, guys, let's take a break. So I walked out, and at the time I smoked cigarettes, and I lit up a smoke. And the other guy went over to the side of the root cellar to relieve himself. He returned moments later, and he says, "Oh my God, did you hear that?" I said, "Hear what?" He said, "There are footsteps that went right into the root cellar." I said, "Where do they come from?" He pointed over to where the tunnels were. Now, he didn't really know where the tunnels were. I don't think he had been there yet. And, I kind of said, "Well, that's weird. I'm standing right here. I didn't hear anything." He's like, "Oh, yeah, I heard him." I said, "Okay." He says, "Well, I'm not going back in there." I said, "Well, yeah, you are. That's what puts in there. You're going back in there. Sorry, dude." As I mentioned too, I was a little brash about this and perhaps forceful, but that's how I thought things needed to be done at the time. I didn't take into sensitivity, how things might be affecting certain people or dealing with the fear and so forth, whatever. And so we went back in, and I think, I don't know, again, making an estimate here, I think we spent another 25 minutes in there, half hour at most. And as soon as we got in, okay, this is where it starts to get really crazy. When you're looking outward from the cellar, you have the door here, and it's dark, obviously, but you have the lights from Worcester reflecting off the cloud cover, and that's where you're getting your general if the moon isn't out. And I could see against that silhouettes of these shadow people come filing right in, soundlessly hit the perimeter of this square interior. And I don't really know how to describe this other than thinking like an assembly line where, let's say you're assembling bottles and they're like flying, by you. I mean, that's how quickly and soundlessly these things moved around me. And as soon as I could process that that's what it was, and they're all about the same height, maybe 5'8", 5'9", something along those lines, there was a bigger being that walked in through that same, and the thing was probably 9 feet tall, if I were to make a guess. And it was sunken in, the head was sunken in sort of like Mothman, but without the wings, and the eyes just very red, very intense, and they glowed, they emanated this light, again, within the red spectrum. And the second that I realized he was there, he was woof, right behind me. And this is when I started seeing little pops of light that looked like fireflies, and they were in the physical space. I wasn't seeing this part in my mind's eye. It was in the physical space, but I was the only one that was seeing them. But it was, indiscernible what I was looking at. I'm sorry, it was very discernible what I was looking at because the lights were popping all different colors: red, yellow, green, gold, white, orange. You name it. All these colors were there. And at the same time, this thing is now standing behind me, screaming at the top of its existence, "What do you want? Why are you here?" And using expletives, like they were, teeth in your mouth. I mean, this thing knew its vocabulary when it came to that type of expression. And I started getting really angry, like, and it. So I said, and I get into the car, and I start to drive away with one of my fellows there, and I said, "Listen," he goes, "Oh, something's wrong. Something's off here. There's something. No, something's not right. I don't know, man. It was crazy, but I don't know. I'm not feeling the exact same thing. That's fine. But I should experience closer to night terrors, and I was experiencing this entity coming into my dreams and giving me experiences everywhere from sleep paralysis to waking up, probably sleep apnea. I'd wake up like trying to catch my breath as if I hadn't been breathing. I would go back to sleep. I go back into the dream. It'd wake me up again. So I didn't really sleep for probably a month and a half. I was dealing with that exclusively, along with other anomalous stuff that was happening within my waking life. And it didn't just affect me. It affected my friends. It affected my girlfriend at the time. It affected my parents, my family. It affected everything around me. And always there was a sense of dread. And the way that I describe that is if someone was holding a knife to your neck and just walk around with you saying, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. You don't know when, but it's coming. Don't worry." And you get this anxiety that starts to really ball up in you. And it affected me immensely. I became withdrawn. I went into some severe depressional states. My mentality started becoming much more morbid. And I wasn't in a place where that should have been the case. Like I was very, was not thoughts that were just pounding into my head and being reinforced by this energy through the experiences to weaken me so that it could probably, what we figure, feed off of that energy or that fear. Now, a couple things here. When I mentioned this to Michael Cram, that this had happened, he kind of laughed. And I said, well, listen, dude, it's not funny. I'm not having a good time here. He goes, no, it's just that it probably found you. I was like, well, what do you mean probably? I mean, it's here. It's right here right now. And he said, okay, so we're going to take some measures. We're going to exercise this thing. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Let's, I'll take care of this. I got this. Because I didn't want to get all these other people involved. The way that his process went was just time consuming. I didn't have the time. I wanted to get this done. And the other thing I want to mention is that, in respect to feeding off of your energy, or maybe that's why they're attached to you, what I understood out of this is that when you call on spirit, regardless of what it is, and listen, I didn't call for that one specifically, but just happened to hear my voice, so to say, they'll come. So when I finally turn around and face this thing, still screaming at me 3 months later, basically it said, I called. I mean, you called, I came. What do you want? And it was mad that it was with me for as long as it was. Honestly, the more I think about it, I don't know if it even really chose to be with me in that way. But I'm going to kind of err on the side that, there was an intentionality within this being to be with me in that presence. And so I, took all the courage I could. And, I've worked with Archangel Michael. I've been working with energy for a very long time. As I've mentioned before, forget about the verbiage. It doesn't matter about the language. It's about the energy that you can identify. And that's just what we know it as, right? So he was behind me. And one of the most significant things that I can impart about that experience is that they weren't there to save me. Archangel Michael and his Legion of Light they were not swooping in to take me out of a situation and, protect me. Not there as a support, saying, okay, go ahead. No, you got this. You know what you have to do. You already made the mess. Clean it up. So, with this in mind, I'm still in my mind's eye standing in front of this being, and I'm explaining in one way, shape, or form, listen, I didn't even call for you. I was looking for others. I understand the call went out and it became more of a, and I although in my heart of hearts, I was not having a good experience with this thing. I don't know. Maybe it was the natural course of that vibration. You can't have a good experience when this thing is around, right? It's just part of the makeup of who it is. And as I'm explaining this, and I did repeat a few of these things with a little bit more vigor as I went through, because I started feeling stronger as I saw this thing start to back away from me. Very slowly at first, very slowly. And as I kept going, eventually it sat what I would equate to be about a football field away. And there was a darkness within this landscape that it was in. Nothing I could make out discernibly, any sort of structures or anything like that. But there was a depth perception. There was a spatial characteristic about this area or the space it was in that I could see. And this is where it stayed in the background for another, span of time after this, but it didn't bother me the same way that it was doing before. It didn't come full force. So it backed off and eventually it was gone. And I had assumed that it returned to where it was. Now, the other investigator Michael was mentioning that he had to exercise this same entity off of was a woman by the name of Joni Mahan. And I didn't know her name until years later when I put it together that this was who it was. Like, I found her book, The Bone Collector, and I said, wait a minute, this is the same woman. This is the woman. So I immediately got in touch with her. And our initial conversation back and forth was interesting because there was some excitement within the recognition that we had dealt with the same exact entity, although it messed with her twice. The first time with 10 months, I believe. And the second time, I forget how long it was, but she ended up going back to revisit, thinking after the first experience, well, we got rid of it. It's back to where it's supposed to be. And no, it was still there on the grounds and it found her again. So in regard, I can never go back that space. I spoke to her earlier today, actually, when I released, I sent it, the link out to her and she watched it, very much enjoyed it. And I said, I still can't go. She said, well, I think it might be gone. I said, do you really want to take the chance though? I don't, you know what I mean? She's like, yeah, you're right. So again, the corroboration have known. We couldn't have known that unless, we had the exact same entity. Of course, I did a show with her, and we did discuss that at length.
Wow. Okay. This is
Sorry, that was.
Yeah, no, it's great. Okay, so your internet's cutting a little bit in and out. So here's the thing. Places where there's been a lot of trauma and a lot of bloodshed, let's just say, I think a prison camp would be one of those places, in my opinion. And to me, I would assume, we have a lot of cryptid activity, Michael, at places like Civil War battlefields and places where there's been a lot of trauma, a lot of bloodshed. There was a lot of potential activity going on at Camp Hero, where all of that like torture went on with all the children there. And we know that firsthand from the people that were with us, and from the activity that goes on there, even the Sasquatches and everything that are out there. I mean, we have a lot of activity. But at that prison camp where you were, it seems demonic. And if there are people there doing rituals and conjuring things, and there's been a lot of bloodshed and sacrifices, and Lord knows what's going on out there. I don't even watch ghost shows anymore, Michael, because of the demonic aspect of this. I feel like it can even come through my television. That's why I quit watching Ghost Adventures. Okay.
Understand. Absolutely. That's the thing that people didn't understand. And I still don't think a lot of people understand that. I mean, the television is that sort of portal, but it becomes a portal because you're focusing your attention on it, and there's a synergistic or symbiotic effect that goes into that, wherein something connects. And Ghost Adventures actually found this out through experience. And you don't even have to talk to these guys. You can find some of the productions. These guys, just they mentioned something that happened, and boom, a plant falls off, a windowsill, or the TV falls down, or something else goes on within the environment that lets them know they're still not alone. I mean, that's still there. And, as I've mentioned before, I mean, what they did and the way that they did it affected their lives in a very negative fashion. They sort of just went through the acceptance and whatever extremes they had to. But again, what you're saying is absolutely accurate insofar as I understand. That's something to take into consideration. Forget about it. It's equatable. Losing internet here. Hold on. It's almost equatable to running through forest of razor blades with your clothes off. Okay, and not realizing that that's what you're stepping into, because at every corner there could be something there that you need to deal with, but you don't know what you're going up against. You're just there willy-nilly playing around, and it's not a place to do that. I mean, when you get into the paranormal world. So yeah, there are many different interpretations of it, but I think there are some consensus that we've come together with overall.
Oh yeah. Oh, Michael. Okay, so you're bringing up some excellent points. Okay, because that's why I try not to do ghost hunting anymore. It's just there's too many lower vibrational frequencies that could attach. I mean, I've had hitchhikers that came home with me from being out in the field doing Bigfoot research. I had orbs that came into my home that followed me in from the field one day. I'm convinced, and so, but we have issues like that out in the field when we're in the woods doing Bigfoot research. Okay, because there's a lot of energetics out there that you don't need to mess with. Okay. You just don't need to go conjuring things up. You don't need to go challenging things to show themselves and all this kind of stuff. And being just putting that frequency out there of like anger or like challenging stuff. Like that's just not my style personally. Like, and I know if people want to get the results, I mean, they'll give you the results. Okay. And it might not be so pretty. And that could have been life-threatening for you. I mean, it puts you on the brink of almost losing your mind, it would seem like. Yeah.
In a sense, absolutely. Because it just wears on you. Yeah, it just wears on you. And after time, you realize that was part of the plan. The weaker that you become physically or within your own life, the instability that floods in, this is when they attack. And it's not that they're not attacking already. It's when they turn up that dial and it becomes even worse. And I mean, I don't know. I've come across cases where it's questionable. Maybe somebody was murdered bug of some sort, okay, whatever. And there are, but we can't really prove it. And these cases are not cut and dry the way that you would think, something like that would kind of show itself. So, yes, I do believe that. Well, let me put it this way. I don't think that it's the entity that it's actually going to take you. Okay. It's supporting that whole idea. But in the end, you just have enough of it and you finish it, right? You finish the job yourself because you can't take it anymore. We've heard lots of cases like that. But at the end of the day, what do they rule it as, right? That's what it is. That's what it is in the books. Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so, in addition to these spirits, these dark entities taking over people, we also now are contending with, and I see people in the chat talking about like government programs, and you and I both, we're both into like these black projects, secret space program, Project Montauk. I mean, all these different projects they've had. They can get into our dreams at this point and change our dreams and alter our thinking. And I don't know if it has to do with the cell towers or the Wi-Fi or whatever, or the chemtrails. I mean, whatever they're putting into our atmosphere, it's all of it. It has the power to destroy us in a way. And I actually did a show. I believe my friend Barry, maybe Barry was on the show with me, Barry Littleton, but we were talking about demonic entities coming through technology, and especially our new technology that's out there. So they get in here however they can, apparently, and so we just have to be aware of that. So yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, what is all of this, right? What is the technology that we're using? What are the entities that we apparently come into contact with that are around us always? Their frequency, okay? Everything is measured in frequency, amplitude, vibration. Look at Tesla's most famous quote. He even knew this stuff, okay? But when you start, looking at reality for the composition of what it really is, you start to understand how all these things have a place within that matrix, if you will. For projects like the Montauk Project, where they're amplifying certain frequencies and seeing how that affects a human body or a human mind, for them to be doing that and then coming to certain results and then building off of that and staircasing up in that type of revelation. Well, today, what you just said is absolutely true. There's no fantasy about it. Again, the science is frequency. How do you program something like within frequencies? Well, you get a very narrow band of those frequencies that follow a set of certain variables, and sure enough, you can do it. And I'm not saying it's that simple. I'm just using that those words for explanation. There's a lot of science that goes behind that and understanding how to pinpoint that. But by and large, it's been done. And I wouldn't doubt for a second that they're still enacting that in one way, shape, or form on the general populace. And it doesn't matter what country you're in. I think that they can reach that. I mean, we got satellites above us and all kinds of space junk just floating out there. You can't even imagine what that looks like, right? But they have the technology to do this stuff.
Okay, Michael, what do you think about, let's say, famous singers and actors and people in the media putting spells on people and things like that? Also, I mean, it just seems like we have so many forces working against humanity right now in so many ways. But it's almost, you see those concerts where they've got the hypnotic videos going and people can't remember the concerts. I think James was telling us about that. And who was it? I guess it was... that they were talking about how that I'm just going to go ahead and say it, the Beyonce concert, okay? And people at that concert could not remember the concert. They didn't remember even being there. Total mind wipes. Okay, their minds were wiped at that concert. What's up with that?
Honestly, I think they're playing around with certain elements of the technology that they've already been using behind closed doors, and they're seeing how brazen they can be. Can we put this right in front of somebody's face, enact it, and then have them, without any awareness of what's going on? And I think, to take a movie or any sort of entertainment, concerts are a great place for this sort of thing. If you were to think about it, you have the gathering of folks and they're there for one reason and they're mostly distracted by the entertainment that they're supposed to be in. So why not experiment a little bit and try this? I mean, that's just a thought. I mean, I don't have any proof or evidence that would be the case, but I could see them going that direction. But that being said, we're coming to a point where, listen, we live in a duality. Those forces are meant to go back and forth. The yin and the yang are of the same bubble, so to speak. It's part of the whole, but you have to have one and the other. So people say, oh, we're light and we're dark. Okay. But what do you express? You have the choice of what you express. And so it's similar to sitting in front of a whole set of paint colors. And you're going to say, okay, well, I've got all the paint here for the canvas I'm going to paint. Which colors do I want to use? And the guy next to you has the same paint kit and he says, oh, I'm going to use red, black, and green. You're like, well, I'm going to use yellow, blue, and white. You're still using the same paints, but you're having completely different expressions. So, when it comes to something like that, you have to keep in mind that the cabal is behind a lot of this stuff too. And they're deeper within the origin and the foundation of this type of research than many people realize or want to look at. That's what I find interesting very quickly. A lot of people who get into the black projects, they'll acknowledge that there was some sort of Luciferian faction behind it, but they don't go through with that. They want, well, let me look at the time travel aspects. Well, let me look at the technology. That stuff came about because of what they were doing within what I just mentioned. So it's a big part of this reality. There are a lot of people who subscribe to that in one way, shape, or form. I couldn't tell you exactly what the lure was at the end of the day. I know the energies are strong, but I mean, the opposite side of things is just as strong, if not stronger. So control, manipulation, monetary gain, physical garnering of different materials. This is what drives a lot of people, but it's indicative of the way that we think while we're in that third dimensional state. There's a lot of different souls at different levels here all at the same time. And apparently, from what I understand, that's the way it's always kind of been.
Yeah. Yeah. I just had a thought too. When people are at those concerts and they're or even a football stadium, you and I had a conversation about, I think we were texting or something the other day, about the spot where we did the ceremony at Camp Hero. And I had remote viewed it and I found some like crystals and things under the ground. I'm thinking places, I think that they feel, this is just a thought. Could they potentially, like they as in like the people in charge here, put like football stadiums and concert venues and whatever over places of power to harness all the energy of all the people that are there? Because we're like batteries, right? So I'm just thinking they're harnessing all that energy. They're hypnotizing everybody that's there, and they're putting them in like a theta state or something for total mind wipes and control and whatever. To go out, I don't know. I'm getting too conspiratorial tonight, I guess.
No, that's a really good thought because yes, I think they certainly would and could and have put certain things like that on power spots. I mean, Christ, you look at where ley lines intersect and you'll find all sorts of monuments or you'll find government buildings. I mean, the Pentagon itself is the shape of a pentagon. I mean, these are all intentional things. And yeah, you can go down the conspiratorial end of things when you talk about that. But again, where these people decide to place certain structures in architecture, even within Montauk, Camp Hero was a sacred place. It was a sacred place well before anybody came by and used it militaristically. The Native Americans used to meet there. We had Council Rock, where people would come from, scores around, and they'd meet there. It was a very community-oriented stone, and it held a sacred property to the people of that area and of that era. So yeah, they can definitely do that in respect to harnessing our energy through, whatever minerals or crystals are underneath us. I don't know. But again, I think that's a really interesting thought and should be explored further.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now, well, if people want to explore you further and all the stuff that you're doing, where can people find you? I mean, this hour just went by really quickly. We still have a couple of minutes. Tell my audience where they can find you, and tell everybody what you're working on right now and where they can check that out too.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. This has been absolutely delightful. And you're right. The last hour felt like 10 minutes. That's how you know you're having a good show, though, right? That's a great indication right there. You guys can find me over at DarkHour Paranormal. I'm on YouTube. As you well would figure, I don't really do the website thing. I don't do it. I don't know. But anytime people have websites, I never end up going there. So, I mean, I follow the channel. DarkHour Paranormal. I'm also with ThirdPhase of Moon. I'm with Goofon and Apollo Stereo and Dr. J Radio Live. I manage his channel. you can find me in any of these places. Right now, I'm working on 2 documentaries. The follow-up to the Montauk Enigma, which was the first movie. We'll hopefully be releasing this by the end of September, I'm hoping. I might give myself the leniency because there's a lot here that I'm thumbing through, and I'll make this really comprehensive. And the way that I've edited it so far is turning out that way. So it might be early October. Regardless, it's in the very immediate future. And I'm also working on the documentary from the trip to Belize, and what we're doing with that moving forward in terms of ArchaeoX, the production company that we, Jared and I, and Jim Goodall actually have created to bring us back to Belize and really work with some of these sites, and then to bring interest to those sites and create an economy for the villages that right now have no jobs, no work, and no income. But they're sitting on a gold mine of a site that is partially excavated. And I mean, we want to turn that into something that will bring profit to the Mayan people of that area. And that's as much as I can really say about that at the moment. But that's what I'm working on right now. And if you're in Massachusetts, I will be speaking at the Salem Paracon in November. I think it's the 11th and 12th, something along those lines. So if you're interested, come on out.
Oh my gosh, you're a busy man. I tell you what, you're so busy, and I love it. Booked and busy. That's the way everybody.
Thank you.
I'm not saying everybody should be that way, but I'm proud of you, man. You get the job done.
I appreciate it.
You got your boots on the ground out there for sure. So
always.
Always, Michael. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure getting to hang out with you and getting to hang out with you tonight and in person back at Montauk. Hopefully, we will see each other again very soon. So thank you for being here tonight. All right, come back and see me again. You'll be on my show soon enough. Oh, shoot. Yeah, I'm totally there. Okay.
We'll talk about that.
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
Okay. Listen, have a great night and come back and see me. Okay. All right. See you, Michael. Bye. All right, y'all. That was amazing. I just love Michael. You guys go check him out. Let me get this banner off my thing right here. There we go. Okay. Don't forget that right after this show, y'all go hang out with the After Hours crew. They have something lined up for us, and it will be fantastic. Now, next time, which is tomorrow night, on Off the Trails, right here on Spaced Out Radio, I have the head of my team, Trey Hudson, from Anomalous Studies and Observation Group, also the author of the Meadow Project, Explorations into the South Skinwalker Ranch. He's going to be on here. We're going to have a great time. That's going to be so fun. He may even let you in on a little bit of inside on me. Hopefully he doesn't give anything super embarrassing away. And oh, the Debster, I saw you just did that super chat, but I got to run, you guys. Thank you so much, the Debster. We appreciate you here at Spaced Out Radio. You guys have a wonderful night. I will hopefully see you guys over after hours, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye.